So I wanted to have a little bit of a conversation today about the end game, and I'm talking about the entirety of the end game, not this T15 plus and blah 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 that a lot of people are saying the real end game is tier 15, and most people aren't even there yet. In my opinion, tier 1 mapping is the end game. You get through the campaign, even though we only have the first 3 acts, we will have 6 acts by the end of it. So as soon as you finish the campaign, you are in the end game. It's kind of pretentious to turn around and say that you're not in the end game until you reach the pinnacle of content. It's kind of bullshit. Now in the background, you're going to see tier 13 map. I'm running a tier 13 map, and there'll be a couple of other bits of places that I'll put up there while we're talking about this stuff. So there's something to look at rather than just my pretty face. Now, I'm not going to spend the entire video just complaining about the end game, but there's a lot of things in the end game that I really don't like. I hope you enjoyed the clickbait title. It's not really clickbait because I do find a lot of the end game actually terrible. Even from tier 1 to tier 5, you can still have some fun. You can still have some creative freedom. But if you go further than that and you start going into the more one-shot mechanic areas where you have to stack a certain amount of life or a certain amount of armor or energy shield, or you go mind over matter, allowing you to just tank with your mana health bar, and you have to kind of focus more defensively than you do in many of the other builds you're going to play. Even when I'm playing the Witch, I'm playing the Witch at the moment, and I kind of bricked my own character. I respec out of some stuff to put into another stuff to test it. Didn't realize I didn't have enough cash because it started costing me 10k gold per node. I didn't look to see how much it was, and I kind of don't have any cash now. And the character is no longer strong anymore, but that's a whole different kettle of fish. So I kind of have to go back to tier 1 and start racking up some gold and trying to get as much as I can, and then get back into the tier 10 plus area. But I'm having a lot more fun running through the acts. I've got a sorcerer, I've got a monk. I'm kind of just going through the campaign a few times because I have a lot of fun with the campaign. There's a lot of fun with the bosses in the campaign, and the end game it really feels quite a bit tedious, and I'll tell you why it feels tedious. The maps are too big. For what the mechanics are in the end game and in the mapping, they're too big. You go from one side of the map to the other. You could clear most of the mobs on the map. Now, before it was even worse when you had to get below 50 mobs on the map just to see where the bosses were. Now it's only 200, which is a good change. But you can clear most of the map, and then you go to one side. You might have missed a little corner of it. Now, you might say that's a skill issue. You might say that's my problem for going in there and just not going in and finding the little crevice with one of the bosses in it. But you can clear the entire map. And then you find out that the last boss is the other side of the map. Or let's say, for instance, you clear out most of the map and there's a boss there, boss there, boss there. You end up having to just literally run around the entirety of the map with nothing to kill. It feels like I'm wasting my time when that happens. Now, it's not always just my fault that I missed something, and it's just some of the maps, they're made in a way that you're going kind of like through it. If you looked at it in any other way, it's kind of like a cave system. Like, even though you're in an open field, there's all these bits of impassable terrain that you can't get past. So you're going through and you're trying to get every corner, but you could still end up in a completely different direction to where the boss is. So for me, it's just really tedious to do. Maybe they can change some of the mechanics in that. Maybe they can change the size of the maps. I don't know if they need to be smaller or not. I just think the bosses need to be in a better placement, or each of the maps should have a set number of bosses kind of close to each other rather than all over the map. I feel like it's kind of just a time wasting mechanic to make the end game last longer. Kind of feels that way, at least in my opinion, for the early tiers. Now in the later tiers, when you start smashing through stuff, you can get through a map in like 5 minutes, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes. But at the start, when you're taking it easy, it can take you a long time. Remember to like the video, guys, if you do enjoy my content, and subscribe if you're new here. This is all your Path of Exile 2 content. We've got loads of guides coming up, lots of different build videos, etc, etc. We go through stage by stage. So there's all that there if you want to find it. Now, this is probably kind of a little bit of a hot take. I hate the mapstone system. I hate the fact that the way you can get into the higher tiers is to go through the system of using a map tier stone to get into a map. Hopefully, you have a mapstone that has a higher percentage chance for mapstones to drop, and then you have the nodes put in the Atlas passive tree that allows you to go in and have a higher percentage chance of getting a higher tier mapstone. But then if you just have a bad map, like I had a series of bad maps. I was up to tier 8 a little while ago. Probably a couple of days ago, I was up to tier 8. And I got to tier 8, and then I ran out of mapstones because no mapstones were dropping. Now, I was doing... There's a kind of cheeky trick to getting through the mapstones themselves. use the higher tier map stones with the higher percentage chance for map stones to drop on boss maps. So like the main boss maps where you have to fight the main, like a main boss with the bar that comes across the top of the screen. If you do that, there's an almost certain chance that you're going to get a higher tier map stone. Like I jumped from tier 5 to tier 11 at one point because it dropped me a tier 11 map stone, and then I just used the lower tier map stones to go in between the different parts of the map, and then jumped into when I got to a boss map, I then put the highest tier I could with the highest drop rate I could for the map stones, and that was jumping me through the tiers like no one's business. Now, if you're watching the video in the background, before anyone says anything, that tier 5 on the quest tracker doesn't indicate what tier you are. Like anyone who thinks that indicates what tier you are is just gatekeeping. It's not the case. If you're doing it the way that most people are actually doing it, and you're going in and you're getting the bosses and doing the map stones, as I just said, on the bosses, then you can get to higher and higher tiers without having to do that many maps. So then you start grinding out the maps at a higher tier. You're getting more XP, you're getting better loot, you're getting better gear, or everything is just a lot better. And that's a really quick way of getting through it. I'll probably do a guide on that actually, because it's kind of like, it's kind of cool that you can actually do that. But when you have a slew of boss maps and a slew of areas that don't drop any map stones for you, like 0 map stones, then you can just end up getting dropped back to the tier of whatever you've got left. At one point, I got no map stones to drop in 2 days that I was back to going to the merchant to buy tier 1 and buying as many as I could, and they cost 10k per. That's a lot of gold, even though you're getting quite a decent amount of gold when you get to tier 10 plus. 10k gold per one. You have to buy 3 to make it a 2, then you have to buy, like, it is multiplicative, so you're just sitting there and you'll get 3 tier 1s to make a tier 2, you need 3 tier 2s to make a tier 3, so you need 9 tier 1s to make a tier 3, and so it's 90k gold just to make 1 tier 3 map. And they're just flat base map stones. There's no chance for you to upgrade those map stones. Now you can go in and use your currency, but currency is so rare. There's just too many. I feel like there's just too many RNG mechanics with every step of the game. I feel like I'm playing a mobile gacha game. Now, granted, I am having a lot of fun playing the game. Don't get me wrong. I'm just not a fan of the end game in the current state that it's in. Like I don't mind the RNG mechanics. I don't mind maybe me getting loot or not getting loot. I don't mind maybe getting the right stat on gear. The gear RNG, I'm perfectly fine with. I'm absolutely happy with the gear RNG. Because sometimes you'll get good loot, sometimes you won't. I've played MMOs for 4 years, and most of my life, I started with Dark Age of Camelot back in 99 to 2000, and getting a good loot drop in there, until they added Trials of Atlantis, which gave you artifacts where you go into a certain boss and you had to complete the boss as a raid group. But I'm talking about something else because that's my favorite game of all time, my favorite MMO of all time. I love that game. So I'm not adverse to having issues with finding the gear. That's not my problem. What my problem is getting knocked back, your progression destroyed because of RNG. Now, you can not get gear for 2 weeks and it not ruin your progression. It doesn't drop you back. But you could have spent 5 hours getting to tier 8, for example, and then not get any more tier 8 map stones and get dropped back down to whatever level. Let's just say you have a load of tier 3 ones. You go back down to tier 3, then you have to work your way back up again. You can get to tier 11 that time. But then you have RNG where the map stones don't drop unless you're doing it in a certain way. But even then, as I explained, it doesn't always work. You'll end up with just dropping back down to tier 6 and having to work your way up again. For me, it's just a time waster. The mechanic itself is not fun. For me. It's not fun to do that. It's not fun to have my progression destroyed because of RNG. There are places for RNG with the gear. There are places for RNG with the loot drops. Because it doesn't destroy your progression. But let's move on to the next part. What I'm really not liking, at least in the tier 10 plus region, is the destruction of freedom of creativity that you can have with your builds. You can no longer go and be flashy and DPS ridden, and I mean, granted, not all T10s. You can have some easy ones. You can have some hard ones. When you get to tier 15 plus, I don't know if... I mean, most of you guys have seen the Kriparian video. Most of you guys have seen Gazzy and everyone talk about all of the times where you have to stack life. You have to stack mind over matter. You have to stack armor. You have to stack defensively. So the board is then taken up by all of the things that you need to do to make it defensive. And then that's not even to mention the fact that all of your gear requires certain resistances to be able to even go into the map in the first place. Because if you don't have resistances past tier 8, tier 9, you're getting one shot regardless. Trash mobs, doesn't matter. You'll get one shot. I just feel like the creativity that you can use to go into a map, and it might be my skill issue. I don't think it is, because I'm not that bad at games. I'm not the best in the world, but I'm not bad. I'm mid-tier. I'm a mid-tier gamer. I'm not bad, I'm not amazing, but I should have some freedom in what I want to do. Like if I want to play a demon and fly around throwing fireballs and blowing stuff up, then I should be able to. That's why we play action RPGs. We want to enjoy ourselves and we want some flashy content on the screen. Now, there'll probably be some Path of Exile diehards that are going to say, well, if you don't like the game, don't play it. This is the game that we like, and you're a very small amount of people, and there's a lot of us. I believe, at least I think so, that there's a lot of people in the same boat as me. I don't want the game to be easy. I want the game to be hard. I like games being hard. What I don't like is difficulty for the sake of difficulty. There are many mechanics all throughout the game, which is not difficulty. It's tedious. You have one-shot mechanics coming from most directions, even from some white trash mobs, especially in the higher tiers of the endgame maps. You have all of those things. You have stuff that goes on the floor. Now, if you're playing a caster and you've got a lot of different mechanics going on where you are casting and there's all the pretty graphics and stuff, you cannot see what's on the floor. Now, if I'm getting one-shot by a guy that's off-screen that I can't even see, for instance, I'll probably put a little bit of a video up here where I get literally hit by a comet from nowhere. Comet comes out of the sky, one-shots me in a tier 13 map. He's not even on the screen. Like, the mob is not on the screen. I cannot see that there is that kind of mob looking and ready to cast that at me. So I lost that progression, because then I'm back down to tier 10 because I didn't have any more. And I was using that boss map to get a tier 13 minimum, plus to get back to the tier 15 plus. But I was one shot off screen, which there's quite a few arenas throughout the game, and that's just not the end game. There's quite a few arenas where you can actually be fighting a boss and the boss will be off screen. So you can't even see if the mechanic's coming, depending on the direction that the room is, because it's procedurally generated. So like sometimes the boss rooms can be in different directions or in different places, or so in some angles of the camera you could be running around a room and the boss ends up off screen, and he could be doing a frontal cone with no indication that he's going to do it, and you can't see the boss doing it. Like, you just can't see him doing it. Now in bosses, you die, you lose the boss in the map. If you're getting killed because something you cannot see and losing your progression, it's not fun for me at all. Like, at all. It shouldn't be a thing. Speaking of things that shouldn't be, on-death mechanics are literal cancer. They should not exist in games. They should never be in games. There's nothing fun about them. I have PTSD going through the early acts, Act 1, Act 2, and 3. Well, I will wait after a boss has died. I'll wait after a group of mobs have died before I loot something, because I'm waiting for them to explode, because nearly everything explodes after death. When you get to the end game, nearly everything explodes, and I think they should just get rid of that completely. That's not fun for anyone. Even the hardest core of hardcore players they'll agree that on-death mechanics is just dog shit. There's nothing good about them whatsoever. Now I kind of ranted on that bit because I hate going through, and then at first I was waiting a couple of seconds to go over there. There's no indication that it's about to explode. Now the red boys, the chunky boys that you get in Act 3, they glow red and then explode. You can see them. It looks cool. That kind of thing amazing. But there's just a body laying on the floor for no apparent reason. There's no indicator that it's about to explode. It just blows up, and sometimes even 10 seconds after you killed it. So you'll be going in, boom. That's not difficulty. There's nothing difficult about that. That's just another way of adding time to the end game that just, you're going to wait just in case. Ooh, isn't it? Right, we should move on from the on-death mechanics. I think we all realized how much I dislike that by now. Let's chill out a little bit more now, because I started getting a little bit heated on the on-death mechanics, because I really think that they shouldn't exist anywhere. Let's talk about the boss maps. Now, I think the boss maps, when you get to a boss map node, it should only be the boss, the main boss. Maybe you can go in a straight line and there's some rooms that open up and there's some mobs that you have to kill on the way, because I know a boss isn't just going to sit there without his camp of army around him. I think the map should be more indicative of going from one thing at the start, to the boss camp. Maybe it's a town, maybe it's a fortress, maybe it's something, but it should all be in one direction. I can't tell you the amount of times I've actually sighed and just sat there and thought, do I even want to do this? Because you've gone through a map, you found the main boss, you've killed him, but then you have to run around and fight 6 mini bosses at the end of the map. But the map isn't complete after you kill the boss. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Like, I've killed bosses and then had to run and kill 3 mini bosses that are all dotted all over the map, and it's just adding to time that is not necessarily needed. It becomes really tedious at that point. Now, we spoke a little bit earlier about the damage of trash mobs. See, the trash mobs in action RPGs, at least in my opinion, they should be about having fun and watching shit explode. You should not have to worry about white trash mobs. And some of them hit bloody hard without any indication of what's coming. Now, you could be actively blocking, you could have resists up the wazoo, you can have all of the things that you need, you can have minions all in front of you. But as I said earlier, the off-screen white trash mob dropped a comment on me. I know it's a white trash mob because I know the exact mob. It's the chunky, hooded, cloaked skeleton guy that just, when you see him and you're fighting him, he puts one hand in the air and then 2 seconds later a comet comes down. But when you can see it, you can see it coming. But that will literally one-shot you. Even though I have 75% resistances in everything. Like everything, except for chaos. I don't have resistances in chaos. It's like 25%. I haven't found gear to raise my chaos up yet. And speaking of resistances, the resistances themselves are taking away from kind of what gear you can have, and you kind of have to stack resistances, and it takes away from being able to go in a different direction. Now, you can find gear that's going to up your DPS, you can find gear that's going to up your life, but it takes up quite a significant amount of gear, and you can't have any creativity of chucking in random uniques to make your build fun. It just isn't there yet. Now, you can stick a unique, like, for instance, Lexiru's got a sorceress, the ice lightning sorceress, that uses a ring that turns all of your lightning damage into cold damage. It's a really fun build. I'm playing that as a sorcerer at the moment, going through all the first 3 acts. I just finished Act 3 going into Crawl, and I'm having a lot of fun with that character, using that ring. But that ring isn't something that significantly changes your build. You're a sorcerer, so therefore you're going to use ice, lightning, or fire anyway. The lightning magic has higher chances to crit, yes. And the cold damage, so your critting's going off the lightning damage, but the lightning damage is being turned into cold damage, and then the cold damage is then freezing things. So it allows you to CC, do higher damage, crit a lot, and do all of the cast on stuff, because you can still do some of the cast on stuff. But I honestly think that when you get to tier 10, tier 11, tier 12, tier 13, 14, 15, I don't think you can play a build like that anymore. I think you can, but there's going to be so many things on the map that can just one-shot you. Even though you can clear the screen, you can just randomly walk over a little bit, or you could just, for instance, when using his build, you can just teleport into a point to kill a mob, and that split second is the second that an AoE on the floor blows up and you're dead, and you lose all the progression. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of one-shot builds. I don't like going in and clearing out a whole map. I've been playing the Witch, and even with the Raging Spirits build, I'm still going through. I still have to take my time. I have to sit back. I have to move forward slowly. And then even if I'm doing all that, there's still randomly a time where you'll sit around and just get blasted and knocked out and dead and lose your progression. Now, there's plenty of other things about the endgame that could be ironed out. Now, I'm not saying that the game is bad because of these things. I'm saying that they need to change in order to make the endgame better. There will be some diehard fans who really want to keep it the way it is. I've already got enough RNG with the currencies and all that. I don't need RNG with the map stones. I just get rid of that. Have it the same as you've got Act 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then have Tier 1, Tier 2 on the top of the map so you can select it. If Tier 15 is too difficult for you, then you have to go into the lower tiers. That mechanic will be perfectly fine. I think that will work in that case, that way better if you just have it as Tier 1 to 15 or Tier 1 to 25, and then have it as a certain amount of power that goes through the entirety of the game. And then you can just just farm a certain tier until you get powerful enough to move to the next tier. I just think that having the RNG and the fact that you have progression at the end game is just not a good way to do it. Now, when it comes to having to stack resistances are fine. You can stack those resistances. I think they need to just get rid of the resistances you lose for each of the acts that you play. The 10% that you gain, you get minus 10% every act that you complete. So you have to stack more and more and more resistances the further and further and further you get into the game. Now, acts 1 to 3 and cruel 1 to 3, it's not really needed that much. I went through the entirety of the campaign without worrying about resistances at all. You have to start worrying about resistances in the end game, and it's kind of a big shot to the system when your entire build is built around the items that you're wearing and you have to change them all because you don't have the resistances anymore because you actually needed them. I think they should get rid of the minuses so it allows us some more freedom to have the gear and wear the gear that we want to wear. I think they should just get rid of all of the on-death mechanics. That's definitely something that they need to get rid of. There needs to be better indicators and maybe zoom out of the camera a little bit more so we can see more of the area so we're not getting one shot off screen, and at least 100% the zoom needs to be pulled out completely in the boss arenas. You need to see the whole boss arena. I don't understand why that's not a thing, because you can do it. There are certain bosses where they'll zoom you out as a cinematic thing and zoom you back in. You can turn that off in the options. So it's not like they can't do it, because it's literally in the options to get the cinematic zoom off and on. So they can do it. They should be able to come out just a little bit more so we can see the entirety of the area. It's not like when I'm running around in real life and I'm looking around in a room that I can't see to my right and left. You can see everything in all directions. So we should be able to see what's on the entirety of at least the boss arenas. They need to lower the damage a little bit. I still think it should be difficult, but I don't think the highest damage abilities should be done on floor indicators that will be covered up by a wall of flame that you can't even see. So again, it's about being able to see what's around you, and all the time. You shouldn't be able to be killed off screen. I'm going to keep saying that, but that's really, really bad game design. Really bad game design. They need to do something about the amount of life you have to stack. The bosses and mini bosses shouldn't hit so hard that you just have to stack resist, life, armor, energy shield, mind over matter, whatever you're doing, mana, tanking, whatever you're doing. You shouldn't have to do that. If you can kill a boss quick enough, then it should be a viable way of playing the game. I don't understand why they wouldn't do that. It takes away from the complete creativity of what you want to play. And again, I don't want it to be easy. I don't want to run around one shot in the entire map, but I still think they shouldn't have done the things of deleting cast on abilities and nerfing the crap out of them and killing a lot of really creative builds, because it seems every time someone gets good enough to build and finds a mechanic in place to get further without having to have life stacking, tank stacking, armor stacking, it gets nerfed completely. And I mean, I'm not understanding the mindset or the thought process of that, personally speaking. Maybe you can let me know down below what you think about the things that I've talked about today. Let me know down below what you think could be done to fix it. What things do you like and not like about the end? Are you okay the way the end game is? Are you not okay the way the end game is? When I do these kind of videos, there's always people back and forth about, well, you should learn to be better at the game. You should blah, 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 blah. I want to hear all of it, because maybe it is a skill issue. Maybe it is, and maybe it's not the game for me in Endgame, but I'm having so much fun in the acts and the campaign and going through, and the making of the power of the character as it goes through the acts is really well done for me. It's just the Endgame isn't that same amount of well done. Right, I want to thank you all for watching. Remember to like the video if you do enjoy my content. Subscribe if you're new here for all your Path of Exile 2 content. Fly safe and avoid local chat scams.